What's up, everybody? It's your boy Showtime Doctor. Now, this was the launch tier list as we had it. I'll leave it up in like the top right of the screen for reference. So first off, Alexi. I still don't have Alexi on my main account, but I have seen him in videos. Other people use him as well as I have him on the test server. Built him up, and I'm a little bit mixed on him, but I think he can still be where I like him. So I'm actually going to still throw him at tier 0.5. The issues he has, his movement is really slow. He really needs some help with that, for one thing. And then otherwise, once you get him rolling, that dude's just an unstoppable monster. He lives after death, like Tryndamere from League of Legends, zerks up, counters a bunch of times, ignores defense, just all this crazy stuff to where you can make him this monster, and if you get him to 5-star, he eventually has 2 turns where he's immune. He can actually serve as kind of your kamikaze tank, which is really good, so I still think he's right there. Thing that keeps him from being top tier is just his usefulness in all the parties. He's really good with like Nona Will, Lola Will, all those cats, Vladarans, but otherwise you kind of have some issues fitting him in. But great kamikaze unit. I'm also judging units on general use. So I see a lot of other creators and a lot of other players, and I listen to them talk, and I watch their streams. I watch a whole bunch of people play this game. Not too many of them are using Alexi. Now, granted, he hasn't had a banner yet, so that is one reason. But even the ones that have him, other than Dotato, you would think a lot more people would be on about him, and they're just not. Now, Beryl, to me, is still up here. She controls the battlefield just so well, and she's... The only constant threat to her, if you're playing her right, is range units, especially archers, which she has mitigation for, but, you know, single target damage, AoE damage, putting fire down on the field to slow people down and do DPS, her big AoE that can kill like 4 or 5 people, big groups of people. Has pretty good mobility. Her energy is almost a non-issue in almost everything. She's useful in tower, useful in PvP, general use. She's just a fantastic unit, just wonderful, wonderful unit. You can even play her as a support if you got a map where like magic damage doesn't do that much, but you want to run someone around that's going to help regen energy, keep things up, and can flame some tiles when you need them flamed, because on a couple of those weapon bosses, she can light up the tile underneath them and it doesn't count as a range attack. So just overall fantastic unit. Very few weaknesses to her. Very few weaknesses. Cole, I started off at tier 0. And I think for early game, Cole is still tier 0. However, Cole's not as useful in tower as I thought she would be once you get past like stage 4 tower. Just doesn't have a lot of use just because everything gets so HP tanky and spongy. Now that's a little bit unfair because we're in the mid game mire, and we were even in the early game funk to where we're expecting Cole to be able to handle all these HP spongy units that she's under leveled for. So that's kind of unfair on my part. On bosses, the physical bosses that you can hit, boss 2 and 3, she's useful, especially on 3 for killing the ads, going up on top of the hill with jump, doing everything, mobility. She's still really good for that. Coming back down, getting a few hits on the boss. But just in general, as we get to mid-game and especially late game, she's gonna fall off a tier. She's not bad. She's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. Her AI is super terrible in PvP. Just in general, if you give it stealth, the AI loves to cast the support abilities. When there's a dude with like 1 HP right next to them, they'll run around and cast like the buff. But that's not really a knock on Cole. I still think Cole's really good. Cole hasn't been surpassed yet in her role. She will eventually be surpassed by a Rawiya. But for now, I'd put Cole in general use there. As we get stronger, and before a Rawiya comes out, Cole might actually climb back up because she's going to be hitting hard enough to take out most things again. But right now, I would say Cole's about right here. Great farming unit, good for offensive PvP, great for Weapon Boss 3, usable on Weapon Boss 2. And just in general, fantastic overall unit. Will really help you if you're looking at this and you're just starting your game. Cole is one of the great units to help your account get off the chain. She can kill 3 units in 1 turn. if you're doing it right. It's just a great unit. So here's another one, Dandelion. I saw Perplatypus using them today. Otherwise, the only place you ever see Dandelion is PvP defense teams and occasionally offensive teams. And I watch a lot of streamers and a lot of streams. So I have a hard time, even though I still think he's fantastic. He has great debuffs, great damage, can do magical and physical damage. I still think this is one of the great units out there, but I just don't see people using him, so how can I keep him at tier 0? Every tier 0 unit barrels one of them. We're going to come across a couple others here. You see them in general use almost all the time, somewhere on someone's account if they have them. I don't see it for this guy. He had a banner, so unfortunately, until things change, I got to take him down to here. Now, he does have the area buff. Safia is going to come out. A couple of the other area powerhouses, Auguste is going to come out. And eventually then you're going to see him a lot more because he has the buff. So you're going to see him with those units and a couple of the other lower tier units. And then by that point, he might be able to jump back into tier 0. But for now, I'm going to put him at tier 0.5. Still think he's a great unit. I just do not see people taking advantage of him. There's something in practice with him that I apparently don't see. And I don't have him. He's the only launch unit I don't have because I got Samantha and I wasn't gonna, throw like 8k currency chasing after him and maybe not getting him. So Fake Cal, I was telling you guys about Fake Cal before. What I said originally was early game, he's whatever. Mid game, he's whatever. Late game, oh dang, he's really good because he has his focus fire and he does really good DPS. Well, Fake Cal enjoys something that a lot of other units in the game do not have. Basically, unlimited counter with range. I think the only other person that can say that is Miguel, and I'm not 100% sure on that. Fake Cal, if you can get him in proximity with not only archers, but casters, anyone with a range attack, you get him within 3 to 4 spaces of him, Fake Cal will counter them from the front or the side as many times as they hit him, and as long as he is alive. So if you can get him in like the cloud of dust and stuff, making him actually really good. And you can get him strike back armor and the strike back tarot. I think that's at 20%. And if you get the proc at the end with the rainbow, he does lifesteal every time he shoots back too. And that also works for maybe not the strike back, but the increased damage, not on his turn stuff, works on his charge abilities too. He has a charge that can stop a unit for 1 attack, or a double charge that doesn't stop a unit but it hits twice, or he can hit up to 2 units or 2 times. So he was the very first person I moved. I moved him up to tier 1. I think he's still a solid tier 1. It's just hard to get him in those situations because you have tanks that want to swap with him. So you gotta like keep them more than 2 squares away from him if you want to get him in those situations where he's gonna strike back. A better unit than I thought. I'm not there anymore when I said that I would rather have copies of him than any of the other Convallaria characters. But I still think he's really good. It's not like a horrible thing if you get a copy of him. Alright, so Garcia. Originally I had Garcia down here. And I think the thing with Garcia is she ramps up if you run her with Devil, especially if you get double Devil Tarot. Even if there aren't a bunch of minions and stuff to kill, so she can get double stacks of her buff that increases attack and defense. Tarot does the same thing as well. This unit has utility in PvP. I once fought a group, they had a fire trap on the bridge, and she pulled one unit in, and they proceeded to beat the heck out of them. It was Princess Guard. Of course, I baited it. As a defensive strategy, it's actually pretty good, because not everyone has Princess Guard. And the fire trap's in the way from the other units coming in to save the day. So she has utility in PvP. In PvE, she's very good against Boss 3. Especially with Devil, with all of the minions that die. Very good against Boss 2. It just takes her some time to ramp up. She needs those 6 turns, but you got 15 turns to kill it, so it's there. And in general, I think if she had maybe 1 or 2 more mobility with her kit, right? Along with her follow-up attack's really good if she's within a line. She ignores armor when she finishes something that I think it's in the dying state. Usually she'll end up killing it. She's way better than I thought she was. She is definitely not tier 2. I'm thinking at least right here minimum. But you got to have the gear for it, for one, and you got to basically be giving her the stuff that you would be giving Cole. If you can get her like Burning Blade or the crit daggers, whatever, and she's running around, she can 1v5 a lot of maps that are like equal level to her. She's crazy ridiculous, but she has to ramp up and she has to get that power. So she needs about 3 to 4 turns. And you got to decide with your team, are you cool with that? If it wasn't for her ramping up, she would probably be tier 0.5 right away. Very gear hungry. In general, I'm going to put her here for now. I think she's actually a really solid unit on weapon boss battles. PvP, she has uses. Tower, not so much. Gloria, I mean, what can you say about Gloria? She's tier 1. She just is. Not only does she have some of the best buffs in the game, she does good damage. She can be like an off tank for you that you can put in front of like a caster or whoever, squishy, while the actual tank is off tanking the big things and maybe gets swapped into a bad position so they can't cover the squishies anymore. She is a phenomenal unit. She's actually coming to her own as an AoE clearer, so that Weapon Boss 3, you can have her if all the mobs are like Triforce pattern. She can go in the middle of them and cleave them all and kill them. You give her Devil, or you ramp her up, have her gear really good. She throws buffs. She can charge. She can knock people off ledges. She can strike back if you want her to strike back. I mean, there's almost nothing that this unit doesn't do. I guess the only real thing she doesn't do is heal and have a taunt. Or a swap that she can cover the units. That's pretty much it. She can do almost everything else. Maybe not magic damage too. But otherwise, man, there is no replacing Gloria. I've seen a lot of you tell me, well, who do I replace for Gloria because I don't have Gloria? I guess Ida right now is the closest thing you're going to get, and that doesn't work in every situation. But Gloria is unreplaceable. You can replace her AoE damage. You can replace a lot of her utility. You can't replace those buffs. Guzman, I still haven't seen a lot of Guzman, and I have seen a couple people play him, but I don't see people bust him out all the time. He's probably next to useless in tower. PvP, I see him on occasion. PvE, generally, I don't see him anywhere. Boss battles, you let me know in the comments. Do any of you use him for anything? Boss battles, anything? So I'm not saying he's a terrible unit, I just don't see a reason to move him up like I see one for Garcia. Now, once again, of course, people don't have a banner, so we don't all have a Guzman to judge him properly. But I'm just gonna stick him there right now. He's like the safety car just in the background right now. Iggy, originally I put him here. I would actually want... I see him a lot in PvP, and I see him a lot when people are running the Splatoran team. I actually think he's better than I thought he was. He has a stun. He has a little bit of control. He has a bunch of movement. He has jump. So I'm gonna go ahead and stick him there right now. I still... And I'm gonna get the chance to because their banner is coming up for Nonawil and Momo. And I've seen it, so I'm going to actually build that entire faction and see how they do, because I've noticed a whole lot of the stuff. I think actually Lilawil has the buff, now that I'm thinking about it. But the buff includes movement +1 for one thing. Lilawil has bonus range. She can actually attack like the Weapon Boss 1 from all the way in the corner behind the rock to where the Weapon Boss 1 can't even reach her for any of like the debuff under the ground or anything, I've noticed. So that team in general has a lot of upside. I'm curious to see when that team's all running together in a pack, and especially when Agatha comes out, how that's gonna work. Because I think Iggy, then he'll probably be tier 1 at least for that team. Inanna, I put Inanna up here originally. And I still think that in most cases she's up there. The issue with Inanna is, A, a lot of you didn't want to re-roll her because you didn't have the patience, or whatever the reason was. You had another unit you wanted to do. And that's fine. The creep is great for baiting out units still. And her healing is very good. Her healing does get surpassed a little bit on certain occasions by Angel just because she puts up so many buffs. 3 buffs when she's 5-star, which we should all have her 5-star by now. And but otherwise, Inanna, the extra turn is god tier on so many units, just fantastic. In general, she's fairly tanky, and she is invaluable on Weapon Boss 2. She's good in PvP, not great. Offensively, she's very good. Defensive PvP, she's trash. But that's not such a big deal. Then, on tower, she's alright. She's alright. The extra turn can really help in many occasions. It just depends what you're running, if you're doing the cheese with all the Luxite stuff. By the way, on Show Dojo, we should have the episode out by next week. Oh, the entire team, so it's going to be me, Hey Magic Joe, Dotato, and our guest is going to be 16-Bit Bear. We're going to go over a tier list for all of the epics and rares and everybody and how they perform on like Weapon Boss, Tower, etc. So be looking forward to that. I'm saving that for that show. Leonidi. So I actually pulled this dude, but I keep trying to use my XP on the current units because XP's become a scarce resource for me. So I haven't really built him up yet to see what he can do. However, I have seen him in use. I would say he's actually a little bit higher than I originally had him, 1.5. I originally downed him because he's a charge unit and he's so much around his charge. But in general, he has a lot more damage than Tiden does. But I just haven't had time to completely go with his skill set. But there are a lot of items that are like, when you charge, you get bonus stats or bonus damage. So I think he's probably going to be like him in the sense that he's a very gear-dependent guy. And once you get that gear on him, he actually turns into probably someone that could at least be up here. But for now, I'm going to keep him right here. Okay, so Lilawell. Lilawell is actually... I had her here. Part of me wants to put her here. And I'll tell you why. I already told you she's the faction buffer. She has a skill that gives her bonus range. +1 range to all single target range attack abilities. Which is crazy. Which is one of the things that makes me really like her. Has jump, has mobility. She stacks infection now that I've had some infection rolling teams on the test server. Actually a pretty fantastic unit doing overall DPS to bosses, and Weapon Boss 1, I actually think she's one of the best units for it, just because you never have to worry about her. She's almost always out of range of anything the boss can do, which is crazy. I did just use her on the test server. She did good on Weapon Boss 3. Her and Ida together is actually pretty strong. Mobility, infection, she has AoE, she has high damage single targets. I mean, she's just a great unit, and like I said, I can't wait to run her and the other faction units together, and when Agatha comes out, that can be a squad that will roll things. Magnus, so I've seen a lot of y'all on Magnus. I almost never see anybody play him. I just don't have the experience to move him up or down right now. I read his kit, I've seen his kit in practice, I've seen him a little bit, but I don't know him. So I'm gonna keep him there for now. But overall, he looks like he's a great unit. Speaking of Mytha, here she is. We should all have her if you've been playing the game this whole time. Probably about 3-star by now with all the quests that are out there and the bonuses you get. Still a great unit, has good buffs. She can do decent damage if you wanted to do some damage. Strike back, cover. Pretty good unit, so I always keep her at tier 1 because I think she's a great unit for a free unit. Miguel, I think I put him at 1.5 when everyone put him at 2. I had the chance to play Miguel. Actually a pretty interesting unit. If you run him with that melee crossbow and you get him in and you start doing like all the melee stuff he has, he actually rocks pretty hard. He's actually a pretty good unit. I could see him with all the fire stuff he puts down being excellent in tower, excellent in PvP. Weapon bosses, depending, he could be okay in 3, possibly 1. Depends. You never know what you're running, but overall, I actually think he's probably up here. He has a lot of range counter and the fire on the ground. The fire on the ground, for those of you that watch A Magic Joe's videos, you can see the Luxite bombs and just the fire Molotovs and everything. So much control over the battlefield. If you can get this guy in a range fight, he's just like Fake Out, but he also adds Scorch and Fire and all these other crazy things. With all his buffs and stuff, he's pretty solid, so I'm gonna actually put him at 1. I think he's a lot more useful than people think, mostly because of his fire stuff, but if he's in melee, he's gonna get the chance to counter a lot more. He can't, not counter melee, but at least not all the time. But range, he counters lots of range. So if you can get him tanky enough to where he can be in there with support, pretty good, pretty good. So I've used Momo on the test server. Momo's issue is her mobility, and she's a little bit slow, not super slow, but a little bit slow. Fantastic damage, fantastic control, and probably the second best spellcaster in the game right now. Like I said, the buff gives 1 bonus movement for her faction. So once that's up, and if you can find like 1 or 2 more ways to get her decent mobility to where it's like 5 to 6 squares, this lady can be crazy. But it looks like she's very gear dependent because you're also wanting to get up her spell damage, you're wanting to get up her stats. So this is all going to take a lot of gear to find the perfect harmony for her. I'm not sure if it's possible mid-game. In-game, possibly, once we get to like the rank 11 and rank 9 skills. Mid-game, she's rough. She's actually really rough mid-game. Not horrible, but it's just, there always seems to be one thing that she's just off on to where, dang, she'd be a great character. If you can get her mobility and stuff in order, yeah, she's right there. She's really good, really solid. So, has use in PvP, has use in tower. You can use her on the weapon bosses. In general use, she's just fine. God, I'm fighting with myself because I want to put her here, but just my experience with her just was not good. I gotta try again. I want to put her there, but I think she's right here for mid-game. Okay, so Nurgle. Originally, I put Nurgle here. I've seen Nurgle in action. I would say Nurgle's actually probably at least right here. A lot tankier than you think. Puts up Dark Light debuff. Probably the highest tier unit that can do it aside from his sister. His mobility is actually pretty good. Probably the main issues with him is just how useful is he outside of a Dark Light team, for one. And for two, what's he doing other than tanking for me? Is it useful in tower? Is it useful, etc.? So that's probably why I keep him there for now. Now, once we get the area buff and all that, hey, possibly he'll be up here. But for now, I'm going to keep him right here. Nona will. I think it was either here or it was here. So Nona Will's issue is she's a frontline unit that has a lot of utility and kind of has to do many things at once. She can hit multiple people. The thing that sets her apart now, and is why I'm going to put her here, she has an ability that can suck in all the units. So if you pair that with like the Luxite bombs and fire on the ground and different effects, you can take units that are out of those effects and bring them back into them. And then use either like the teleport ring or the teleport tactic and get her out, so that she's not getting beat up by all these units. She has great AoE damage. Overall, I actually think she's a really good unit, so I'm going to put her up there. And once that team gets off the ground, she's actually one of the great units of the game right now that a lot of people are probably sleeping on. Nungal. I originally had Nungal. I told you she was here, but if you had Anana, she was here. Early game, Nungal is very rough. She's basically just a basic attack lady, because her damage doesn't ramp up until she really gets to her rank 11 and rank 9 stuff. And you need a Dark Light debuff on. Preferably, because she has an option to do that, but preferably you don't want to have her skills doing that. You can eventually extend her range. Her main issue is every time she moves, she loses 1 range. But if she's standing still, she gets that range back. She gets another skill that helps her increase the range. And eventually, her ultimate attack is a boss killer, but she has to have the right things, including ignore defense, along with as much crit as you can possibly get. So, in general, I would actually say in general, she's probably tier 1, especially if you don't have an Ana with her. Eventually, she's probably going to go up here, especially for weapon bosses. And PvP, she's alright. That range thing really hurts her, though. That's the problem. General use, she's fine. So I probably have to put her here as you're building her up until you get the end game. Once you get the end game, she's probably right there. But right now, I'm going to leave her right here. So Rawiyah, now this lady is a lady that has been on the rise. I put her here originally. If you build her with ignore defense or anything that gives bonus attack, you can also choose to give her devil if that's your fancy. Give her the evergreen pendant. It's a epic pendant that's green, but if you get it to 5-star, it's basically every time she gets a heal, she gets a level 2 buff that lasts for 2 turns. Well, she's healing herself all the time passively. She drinks passively on her turn. I think it's a 50% chance to start off. She has the flash. She can drink when she needs to recover health. When she gets hit, oftentimes she drinks and does her counter. She can counter up to twice per battle when she's 5-star. This is the lady that surpassed Fatal for me on people I want dupes of. She's amazing on Weapon Boss 3. She's amazing on Weapon Boss 2. And quite honestly, right now, she's pretty much almost top tier. Pretty much almost top tier. In fact, I might actually put her there for right now. On bosses especially, general use, she still has an issue because of her mobility. She needs to be able to move a bit more. You got to keep that in mind. But otherwise, you get her enough ignore defense. So you get her the ignore defense tarot, 20%. Another 20% if you roll the end one, the end rainbow, when they're injured, which is 70% to about 20%. But still, the greater majority of their life. Get her a weapon like I have, will she'll ignore 20% of defense if she has, I think it's lower HP than whatever she's fighting. Is often the case right around that injured mark. And then anything else you can do to help her get her crit higher, get her defense higher. She can hit as hard as almost anything in the game, and I think mid-game she can hit harder than anything in the game. Just straight up. Rawiyah right now is probably top tier as far as boss killing. General use keeps her down. PvP, she's pretty good. She has knockback. Just all types of heal, and especially if you run her with Angel. This lady basically, she'll have 8 buffs by the time it's turn 2. If Angel pings a heal on her, she gets hit, she walks up, she counters, she drinks. This lady could have 8 buffs on her right off if you have Gloria there and everything. Just crazy unit buff stacking. Her Sword of Convallaria buff is very useful. Fantastic unit. Right now, she's right there. I think eventually she's going to go down, and she'll probably be here or here once we start getting like a Goose Day and some of the other crazy units. But screw it, I'm putting her right there for now, because you see her on all of the big bosses. There's one that she can't do, because melee damage is basically forbidden on that boss. But otherwise, you can use her in tower to knock units off. You can use her in general use, you can use her in PvP. And once you get enough tactics and stuff, like the move order, it's not really a huge issue. So Samantha, I actually think I had her at tier 1. PvP, she's the best healer in the game. Just her reactions, the bonus healing procs that she gets when people are at a certain percentage, speed proc, energy proc. Her main issue is her energy. And she even has like an extra life, so people can take her to 0 and she'll come back up. So for PvP, she's top tier. Like, she might as well be up here for PvP. PvE, offensively, she's actually pretty good. She can remove 3 debuffs from your allies, remove 3 buffs from your enemies. So Tiden, originally I had him down here at like a tier 3. I have seen the light. I will put Tiden for now right here. Now, here's the thing with him. He's still revolving around charge. He's still very gear dependent. He needs certain pieces of gear that usually revolve around charge to make him good. But if you can get those pieces of gear, he can actually be probably right here. He's very good for Weapon Boss 2 as the tank, because he's debuffing the boss while he's still out of range of the boss, so he can tank as far away as possible, has a shield. And overall, just a pretty good unit for his role. His damage can get better, but like I said, very gear dependent. So you got to decide, do you want to put these amazing pieces of gear on him? I'm going to put him here for now. I still got to see him at high level. Xavier, I originally put here. Xavier is very good close PvP unit. Very good if there's an AoE group to clear, if you need a melee guy to go in and kind of run interference as an off tank slash off DPS. He can be really solid for that. The problem is, if there's range units, he gets destroyed. If he can't close fast, he gets destroyed. So you kind of have to do your whole like tactical resume, buff resume, etc., and have him have his own pocket supporter. Which, depending on how built up your healers or supports are, you know, do you have one that can handle the tank and them? And if another DPS squishy unit gets low, do you have a healer that can do that? Some people do, some people don't. Early game, most of us don't, so I don't know if I'm willing to move him. PvP, he's probably here. Tower, no. Boss, no. General use, he's alright. But I don't know. So I don't think he's bad by any stretch of the imagination, but he has very specific niche uses. So I guess I'm going to have to chill him out with Guzman for now until I see someone actually owning with him in PvE somehow. Miss Ida has released. So Ida, I think, once she's built up and once you actually have proper gear on her and her role fulfilled, she's here. I think she's here. A lot of people will tell you she's here right now, and maybe in this meta right now that's true. But I think she's here. She puts a box down. She can give herself or another range unit highland advantage with that box. Tankier around objects, so boxes, barrels, etc. Has 2 follow-up attacks per round. If you use Urgent Order on her, you got the spare tactics to do it. You can instantly refresh those follow-up attacks, so if you have a range-heavy team or just a unit that's generally tanky. Her buff is amazing. Damage 3 for everybody. Magic defense up, as well as gives a move. Her shield busting is one of the most underrated things about her. She can bust shields like the Weapon Boss 3. She'll melt through that dude's shield once you get her properly geared. Also, she can counter if you want her to counter. She has the barrel she can throw that puts wine down. It can destroy little barriers and stuff. So like the Rattan Ball debris stuff. You can set that on fire. It also slows by 150. Using that on bosses is actually really strong, as well as makes them vulnerable to magic, lowers their magic defense. So units like Barrel, units like Nungal, just clean up with this lady around. So she's a fantastic unit. I actually think she's one of the best units in the game. And she's fun. Always underrated. Very fun unit. Yeah. Yeah, tier list is quite different. I gave Teeden a little bit more respect. It's like Xavier and Guzman still kicking it, but everyone else that was in tier 2 got out of tier 2 and went to tier 1.5. Fake Hal went up a tier. Garcia went up a tier. Mytha and Magnus are still kicking it. Yeah, Miguel went up a tier. Momo. Okay, so Momo was tier 1 already. So I had her pegged right. Nungal I brought down a little bit because of her mobility, but she can still be there. Yep. And then Dantaline went down a tier. Cole went down a tier. And on the rise, Lilawil, and Rawiya, she actually jumped a lot. Once people found out. I remember I had the epiphany moment with Rawiya. I was watching Per Platypus's stream, and he was fighting that really tanky Teeden from Tower like 2 or 3 weeks ago. And he crit Teeden through his shield, ignored defense, and killed him with like a crit that was 12k, 14k, whatever it was. And I was just like, oh, okay, I could see that. Okay. And maybe endgame that's not as important, but man, that is very impressive right now. And you see a bunch of people taking advantage of it. I hope this all enlightens you. Agree, disagree. If you got some experience with some of the units that I don't, please share. Would love to hear it. Let's get the knowledge up for the entire community on these units. Some of them are getting neglected. Do you really like Guzman on your team, Xavier, etc.? Any of these units you see lower tier, do you think some of these are a little bit too high? Let me know. As always, yo, I'm Showtime Doctor, Showtime DR. You found my YouTube. Hit like and subscribe for the content. I'll see you next time, Voyager.